Hey guys, today I'm bringing you an informative video and I thought that I would offer a reference. This is by no means exclusive or the only way to look at things, but it is what I feel the easiest way of deciding what type of categories what fragrances fit into. So if you're interested, just keep watching. What was this? Welcome back. Welcome back to Perfume Vague. Anyway, I'm Holly Golightly and I'm going to be your information provider for this afternoon. This video is informative, hopefully educational, hopefully entertainment, but it does not have to be taken as Bible, so if you don't agree, feel free to disagree. What I'm talking about today is perfume categories, and by the categories, I don't mean like fougere, chypre, floral, fruity, gourmand, etc. That. I mean, is this designer? Is it niche? But wait, I thought they were indie, but they're really mainstream, and yet with a luxury price tag? What does it all mean? Let me help you. With a simple dictionary and a rundown of some of the bigger brands that get kind of lumped into all of these categories, I'm going to try to help you break it down. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is what type of production the fragrance has. Is it an independent production? Is it niche production? Or is it a designer production? The second thing we're going to look at is what type of marketing the fragrance has. Is it a mainstream type of fragrance? Is it not in the mainstream? I don't want to say underground because that indicates that it is literally being kept away from the public, and I think that for the most part fragrances that are very well loved but are not in the mainstream are only there because there's a lack of access to them. And then also price factoring. Does this have an indie, niche, designer, or luxury price tag? So shall we begin? If I'm clever enough, I'll put like the definitions up here on the screen. If I'm not clever enough, I won't, and you'll just have to take my word for it or else look it up yourself. The first category we are looking at is the indie fragrance. The indie fragrance. Indie fragrances can be niche or luxury, but they are by definition not belonging to or affiliated with any major backer or major company. So indie brands operate on their own funding, and the money that they receive for the sales of their perfumes goes back into the company. Now, indie fragrances are not always niche fragrances, and oftentimes they're not luxury fragrances either, because luxury denotes a price tag, and niche denotes that the company itself produces only perfume. Now, indie perfumes are often niche, but they will find that there are indie brands that produce other cosmetic type of items, and some even produce other types of home or bath and body beauty, anything like that altogether. They have a whole range. For the purposes of this video, I am considering candles, so home fragrance, and body care, fragranced body care items such as body wash or body lotion as a perfume in the same genre. So perfume genre as a whole being niche to only those fragranced things. So once again, indie fragrances are characteristic of the deliberately unpolished or uncommercial style of small independent groups. niche, a niche product is either used as a noun in the manner of a specialized segment of the market for a particular kind of product or service. This would be a perfume house that perhaps has a larger branding around it, such as Aquilina, but their perfumes are all focused on a certain group, which is gourmands in the pink sugar range. That is that niche, pink sugar niche range. Pink sugar is not a niche fragrance, but it is a niche scent. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. That's why no one understands. Niche as an adjective denotes or relates to products, services, or interests that appeal to a small, specialized section of the population. So when we are talking about a niche fragrance house, not the fragrance itself, but the house, this means, by definition, that they only produce fragrances. And again, I'm including home fragrances and body care type of fragrances as well. But a niche fragrance house does not make clothes. They do not make makeup. They do not make anything else. Only perfume. Guerlain, in that sense, is not a niche house. They are a luxury house, but they are also a designer house. Moving on into designer. Designer as a noun, the person in charge, is who plans the form, look, or workings of something before it is being made, built, or typically by drawing it in detail. It is made or having the expensive sophistication of a famous and prestigious fashion designer, or it is upscale and fashionable. Those are typical of a designer. Now, when used as an adjective, it becomes the product of the designer. A designer perfume is a perfume that is backed by a designer. And although it may not be an individual person, it could be a house. They are doing other items other than, I was gonna say they're doing other items other than perfume, but they know what that's not necessarily true. Let's take Francis Kurkdjian. This is a person who was actually quite unknown until he entered into the mainstream, our next category, into the mainstream as a perfume designer. So MFK, Maison Francis Kurkdjian, is actually a designer house. It is also a niche house because they do not do anything but perfumed items. They don't make makeup. They don't make clothes. Chanel, Dior, Guerlain, Gucci, Prada, any one of you can think of, they're not niche. It does not matter how expensive the fragrance gets. They are not niche because they are backed by a designer and they have a designer name, and this designer produces other items using that same name. In the case if they were to use a different name to produce fragrances only, then that becomes their niche there. Do you see the difference? Am I losing you or making sense? Who knows? So mainstream then becomes question of, is it or isn't it? This is a much more, I feel like a lot of times when people are confused about whether things are designer or niche or luxury, etc., they're really just confused about whether or not something is mainstream or not. So a mainstream is the idea, attitude, or activity that are regarded as normal or conventional, the dominant trend in opinion, fashion, or the arts. As a noun, that is the mainstream, the literal mainstream. However, as an adjective, it is belonging to or characteristic of the mainstream. So, going back to our example, Maison Francis Kurkdjian, because so many people know this name, so many people equate this name with luxury and high quality fragrances, and so many people are familiar with at least one of his products, Baccarat Rouge 540, which is probably the product you can thank for Maison Francis Kurkdjian going mainstream. He is now out of the underground of perfumery and is shining bright and having his moment in the mainstream. And last but not least, we are going to talk about luxury fragrances. Luxury is a very broad term, and by definition, all perfume and perfumed items are a luxury. They are not necessary for our survival. They are not necessary for us to live, but because we enjoy them, we consume them. Therefore, they are a luxury. A noun, the state of great comfort and extravagant living, the inessential, desirable item, which is expensive or difficult to obtain. So anytime that you are obtaining these items to create a state of comfort in your living environment, you are producing a luxury. As an adjective, it is luxurious or of the nature of luxury, of course. So you could say that all perfume is a luxury, that if it's a luxury fragrance, if you've bought it and you spent money that you had to spend on perfume, it's a luxury. However, when taken out of the context of our environment and put into the context of fragrance, then you have a distinct kind of line of demarcation where the beginnings of availability are, and then the price point at which availability no longer becomes the question, but affordability is now the question. And once affordability becomes the main concern, your item has reached a luxury sort of standard. So take that if with a grain of salt, because everybody's point of affordability, everyone's going to consider something a luxury at a different place because of their own ability to acquire it. So in this particular model that I'm creating, I consider fragrances that usually cost upwards of $200 luxury fragrances. Usually under $200, you can still find the fragrance at an easily accessible source. However, as the price increases, so does the lack of supply. There's a supply and demand aspect that creates a luxury as well. So as the price increases, it becomes harder to obtain, therefore creating more luxury around the item. So for me, that price point is $200 US. For some other people, it may be different. So what can we take away from all of this? We can take away that Maison Francis Kurkdjian is a designer niche with a luxury product. We can take away that Chanel is a designer luxury product, but is not niche, no matter how expensive they get. We can take away that Creed, until they recently sold, was the world's oldest independent fragrance home. Was the world's oldest independent fragrance house. Also, they were niche and luxury. Now that they have sold to a holding company, they are no longer independent, but they are still niche. We can take away that Tom Ford is not niche, no matter how much people want to put the idea that the Prive line for Tom Ford is a niche product. It is not. Tom Ford makes a lot of different things, and you can buy both his mid-range and his Prive lines in Tom Ford boutiques with all of these other items. You can find them in department stores. They are not a niche item. He makes multiple things. They are, however, designer and luxury. There are quite a few indie fragrance houses still, and the majority of them are niche as well. The indie fragrance houses, to the most extent that I'm familiar with are American indie houses. Let's take Italy or France or Spain, where a lot of these are made. There are indie houses in all of those countries that we in the US are not familiar with because of their lack of availability to us. And so indie niche products not backed by any type of big money usually are not offered for sale in, I would say internationally, but in the case of European countries, they may be offered in the European Union, but not offered abroad and places like the US or Australia. There's the Middle Eastern perfume market that has a huge selection of scents that are not known to customers abroad. They're very much niche fragrances, although there's definitely big money behind them. So I really couldn't say that they're indie in that sense. But just in general, I kind of think that the rule of thumb for determining whether a fragrance is indie, niche, or designer is asking yourself, who is behind this fragrance and how are they funding it? What is their source? If it is a fragrance that has no money backing it and they are self-funded, that would be an indie type of fragrance. If they are backed by corporation, that operates in multiple different areas under the same name, that is a designer. If they are backed by a corporation, but they only operate in the perfume industry under that name, then they're niche. And then, of course, mainstream. If you've heard of them, they're mainstream. If you haven't, they probably aren't, unless you're, quite the perfume connoisseur. And for luxury fragrances, that is a price point and availability issue and is kind of determined by each individual where their idea of luxury stands. All right, I hope that this brief explanation was helpful, did give you some ideas of how to categorize perfumes when you're talking about them either in videos or if you are just using the information to categorize your own collection. Of course, this is not the hard and fast rule, but going by dictionary and common sense understanding of the definitions of these terms, I believe that for the most part, all fragrances can be understood in these ways using these ideas. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up if you found it helpful or entertaining. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe before you head out, and don't forget to hit the wiggly bell to be notified of all my future uploads. I know you don't want to miss any. There's some good stuff coming up. So hit that bell, subscribe, leave a like and comment, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!